Hi, my name's Guy Metric. I'm the Global Industry Services Lead for Financial Services here at Appian, and I'm here today at the Fraud and Financial Crime Conference Europe with Rhys Jones, who is the Global Head of Banking at Vuram, to talk about automation across the financial crime lifecycle. We're delighted to be here talking to our peers in some of Europe's largest banks to discuss the opportunities and challenges within financial crime. Looking forward to meeting you. Delighted to be here today. My name is Guy Metric from Appian. What I thought we'd do is just have a conversational discussion around some of the challenges and opportunities around financial crime lifecycle. And I'm joined here by a friend and colleague, Rhys. Perhaps you'd like to reintroduce yourself, Rhys.
Yeah, hi, so I'm Rhys Jones. I head up the banking sector at a company called Vuram, which is a hyper-automation services company. So we focus on automating technology solutions, specifically focused on banks, and Appian is one of our strategic partners.
So I thought what we'd do first of all is really just have a discussion and set some of the scene around some of the challenges that organizations face. And clearly financial crime has been with us for a number of years. It is continuing to be a challenge for financial services organizations. And I'd be interested just to get some thoughts from you as to why do you think that it is such an ongoing challenge for financial services organizations? What are the drivers behind that? And then we can then look to maybe explore later on what are some of the opportunities to take.
Yeah, sure. So I think the things that I'll say today are kind of insight from existing customers and projects that we're actively live on. And financial crime is not something that we think has got a target static state. It's constantly evolving. So regulations are evolving, criminality is evolving, obviously technology landscape is evolving, and organizations themselves are changing as well. So if you think about a large bank, for example, they're quite complex structures. You know, the more global the bank, the more complicated its structure is. And they're constantly trying to find ways to streamline that and reduce costs and work more efficiently. So you've got 4 changing parameters constantly at play. So there's never going to be a situation where a large bank can say, hey, listen, we've cracked financial crime. I can't see that happening. It's definitely something that has to be thought of as an ongoing concern.
And if you think about some of this, the scale of which we're talking about at these operations, if you look at it as a life cycle from KYC, and KYC being the sort of entry point into all of your AML and your fraud processes, because if you can't identify who you're dealing with or who you're doing business with, then it's very difficult to run some of these checks and investigations. The sheer scale of it is actually quite a large impact across an organization. And that complexity alone makes it difficult for you to be able to manage all of the separate elements of that life cycle in an effective way.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret the best way to mitigate and reduce financial crime is to understand who you're working with from the beginning. But often the first time a customer interacts with the organization is during the onboarding process. So you can't afford to spend 6 months, 12 months scrutinizing and trying to understand their customers' ins and outs of every single day business, because they'll get fed up. They'll go somewhere where the process is more streamlined. So there's definitely a balance of getting them on board quickly, but trying to understand as much as possible who they are to mitigate the risk. Now, that's not foolproof. People will get through and you will detect certain financial crime through that life cycle. But I think choosing the right type of flexibility in terms of your solutions is really key. We talk about this idea of federated versus centralized. And in different aspects of banking, they may suit certain scenarios. Financial crime, we believe, should be centralized because data is today's gold. The amount of things that happen in financial crime in, say, transaction monitoring that correlate with sanction screening, that then correlate with even employee vetting, that data underpinning all of that is really useful to this separate financial crime solutions. So building them in federated models all over the place and not connecting them, you're leaving a lot of value on the table. So we do look at it as an end-to-end journey and a life cycle from the customer joins to potentially when the customer is off-boarded. And you build a case along the way to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something which I think is very interesting, which is access to data, and the insight that it gives is crucial. How, in your opinion, are the more successful firms at this? How are they making use of that data across their organizations?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will hear about real time or near real time. So if you think about financial crime and what we're actually doing, we're adhering to compliance, we're listening to authorities and following the rules, we're preventing financial crime, we're detecting it, then we're investigating, remediating and reporting. So there's 4 different steps to that. It's not just one thing. Now, the most advanced organizations and the banks that are leading the way in this, they're managing to access that data at the various points. They're not waiting till it goes all the way through the workflow and then you pick it at the end and you report on it. That's an old way of working. Now you can take the data from the detection stage and you can then tweak your algorithms and your machine learning, your AI. You can make false positives less impactful on your operations, and you can do that at the beginning. It doesn't have to flow through all the workflow and become a case, and then you review the case, and then you understand that maybe your algorithm needs tweaking. You can do it at the beginning. Same with the workflow. The workflow that happens after you detect something is a common pattern, right? Something gets looked at, it gets triaged, it gets assigned to someone, it gets reviewed, it gets investigated, it gets closed. During that process, you can adopt something like process mining on your activity logs and see where is the SLAs being breached, where are you losing time, which teams are potentially taking longer than you would expect, and you can do something about it at that point. And then the same with the analytics that you get off the back of it. You can access that without having to wait for report generation. Technology nowadays, you can click a button and your report will generate itself. There's no multiple emails flying around, different Excel sheets, multiple people reviewing reports, and then the report getting to where you want it to be late. So I think when you access the data and what you do with it is not just linear. You can do things in parallel. And that's what the most advanced people are doing at the moment. Mm.
One of the things that I think is very interesting is that there are a whole suite of new technologies out there that can help support the insight that you get either from things like name screening, adverse media reports, from transaction screening, entity resolution. There are some really good technologies that help in specific elements of the life cycle. And I think that is really how technology is helping make advances. The challenge then you've got is how you then integrate those interesting technologies and the insight they give you into and take action on that, and take action on that in the context of all the other work that you're trying to do as well. And I think that is where we're seeing some value, is being able to do a lot of the orchestration work across the life cycle, taking advantage of all these new technologies, but then seamlessly bringing them into your organization in a way that's not disruptive, but actually supports proper decision making and proper investigation.
100%. I mean, I think the detection stage is where you have to have niche technology, right? If you talk about sanctions screening, transaction monitoring, there's software out there that does this for a living, right? That's its core business, is to do that. We don't ever propose to mess with that, but that's only one part. The interesting part is when you get to the next stage. So detection has happened, so what? Right? From that point onwards, the process and the workflow, no matter what solution you're working on, is very, very common. You're working through something to make a decision at the end. And it's that workflow that you can put onto an orchestration layer. And you can build it once, because you create case, you triage case, you assign to someone reviews, you add notes, you report. It's the same process. So if you build it once for an AML case manager, and then you have a sanctions screening case manager that comes along 6 months later, it's the same functionality. Now, if you can drag and drop that code and reuse the same code, you're building these case managers very quickly. You're scaling at pace. And you can things like test automation. You can store these components with the test scripts. So when you pick them up and use them, if you don't need to do manual testing, you again can do one-click testing. Click, did it work? Yes, move on. So it speeds up your development process. And that orchestration layer is the bit that spans across the entire life cycle. And it's also important that it's very, very integratable. You have to be able to connect to this thing with APIs and do it with ease. Because as your business changes, someone's going to want downstream data from you at some point in time. You want to have the ability to say, fine, we have an API, we can tweak it, we can add a few more fields, here it is, and we can expose it. And then your organization is using the data as what it should be used for. The underpinning gold of financial crime.
So what you're saying there and alluding to, I think, is the fact that there are shared elements across this life cycle that you can build once but reuse across a number of different elements within that life cycle.
100%.
And that then speeds up this pace at which you're able to develop and implement new technology, but then also evolve it and change it, going back to your earlier point around the speed at which this industry is changing and growing and evolving.
Yeah.
And that element in combination is also very important. It's all very well to have the perfect target operating model, but within 6 months it's going to need to change, it's going to need to evolve, and you need platforms and technology that can support that speed of change.
Yeah, and it reduces your cost as well, because you're not building the same thing slightly different 7 times. You're reusing something. So that also adds a quality element to it as well. If you have 7 different teams building 7 similar workflows, one of them is going to get it wrong, or one of them is going to go off piece and then not be able to do audit logging, or something's really critical. So when you package up and give it to them, you're not only saying, here's your development time reduced, you're also saying, look, we guarantee this thing works. It's been into production, it's been running for 6 months, please use it. And you create that community of developers around financial crime. So when one has an idea, they share it with the other one, but always coming back to the idea, it's got to be flexible. So if you need a change, you make that change. And then you can say to all the other 7 guys using it, we've made this change, are you interested in it? If they're not, they can stick with their current version. If they want it, all they have to do is a code deployment. There's no development effort. And that's a game changer, because a lot of the organizations that we work with, if we think about 5-7 years ago, some of these big banks are under DPAs. Right? They had deferred prosecution agreements because they've been caught not complying. So at that point, they had a decision to make. How do we tackle this? How do we get out of this DPA? They didn't have the luxury to sit there and think, well, what's the latest technology? How are we going to structure our data? How are we going to reuse things? How are we going to be able to do advanced analytics? They didn't have the luxury, they didn't have the time. They had to throw things that were available in the market at the problem. So they ended up federating. They built an AML engine, they built a sanction screening engine, they built transaction monitoring. They built it with whatever was available, and they did it in silos. Fast forward now, 7 years later, the DPAs have been lifted. They've proved they've done enough, and now they're thinking, oh gosh, we've got this federated solution. It costs an arm and a leg to maintain. How do we streamline this? First thing they're doing, looking at AI, machine learning, reusability. They've now found themselves at what you would call the starting point. So the investment is increasing now because they're trying to do it better. It's no point having 100,000 name screening alerts every day that you throw to an ops team of 4,000 people. 99.9% of those are false positives. It's not working anymore. So this new technology is the only way forward, and it makes a lot of sense.
So from your experience working with some of these organizations, what do you think are the key challenges and opportunities in the early phases of going down this sort of life cycle journey? Are there things that people should be considering, or is it more of a case of just getting started and start to do work? What's your advice?
Yeah, so I think if we go back again to 5-7 years ago, the decisions were made quickly because they had to be. Today we're in the opposite scenario. We see organizations taking a very long time to make decisions on how they're going to tackle financial crime. So if you have someone that wants to build a financial crime case manager, it's not uncommon it could take 12 to 24 months before they decide on the technology stack and have all of their stakeholders in a place where they have consensus. So decision making is slowed, and I think that's because there are so many options and so many variables now to think about. Are we going to use AI? How are we going to use machine learning? How do we orchestrate that middle layer? What's our data model like? Are we going cloud or on-premise? It's almost information overload. So I think the key now is to pick something where you can maximize reuse and have that flexibility. Because even if you make the wrong decision, worst case scenario, 6 months in, it's flexible enough you can change. But you have to get going. So there's a number of organizations that have taken a long time to figure out what they're doing, and now they're in a position where they have to do something, and they're rushing decisions. So you don't want to be in that position. I'm a big champion of get going. As long as you have flexible solution, you have the orchestration layer, and you're reusing components, get moving. Because you'll also win that battle of the hearts and minds. Once you build one solution, you can then show the organization internally, hey guys, look what we did, look how long it took, and these are the elements that you can reuse. That wins. People recognize that quite clearly.
Okay. I mean, so from your perspective then, getting going is all important. Don't worry about what you're inheriting as a starting point, because there are still options in the way you integrate to start to gain control and visibility on some of those processes. New technology in the areas of things like machine learning and data insight around name screening or entity resolution or transaction monitoring can also help. And it's how you then blend all of those technologies into something that allows you to manage this life cycle in a visible, effective way. And those are probably some of the key takeaways that we found when we've been working with some of the organizations in this particular set of functions. And are you seeing, you talked about that federated model with the last question. Are you seeing people now moving towards a much more integrated approach to KYC, financial crime and fraud, because they see the value then of the insight that data has across all of those different elements of the life cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. And that they're either doing it knowingly or unknowingly. And when I say unknowingly, it's they're pooling their data, right? They are putting the data into a single place. You hear about compliance data repositories or compliance data lakes or FinCrime data lakes. That's an attempt where people have got a federated model, trying to consolidate the data so they can run really useful insight out of it. And that works, that's challenging. It's a lot of investment and time, and you need some very smart people to work all that out so you don't have any performance issues on your overlying systems. But if you were to start again, you would build that into it from the beginning. You would say, right, I am taking a real-time snapshot of this data at this point every day, and it's going there. That way you kind of build it from the ground up. But it's definitely becoming an end-to-end life cycle because information is so useful across the whole piece.
Okay, that's all we had, I think. I think we're close to time, but if there's any questions, then I think we'd be happy to take them.
Yep, we've got a bunch of questions here, so let me squeeze on up. And I'll just come over here, so. Let's go from the top here. So question number 1, what is the average time frame in implementing a data solution? So inference ML/AI solution from inception to live in production.
So I think the key here is what state is your data in? So if you go live into production with a solution that's got functionality, you've got users on it, what state that data model is in? Is it in a point where it's been built for machine learning and AI to be plugged in? And if yes, then you can plug tools in. It does take a little bit of time for the data to be read and for the patterns and behaviors to come out. So I'd say a minimum post-solution between 3 to 6 months to start getting benefits of AI and machine learning. But again, it's an ongoing process. The machine learning will learn, it'll constantly evolve and get better. And you'll also QA it. So you'll take snapshots of certain cases that the machine has auto-discounted, and you'll review, why did it do that? And you'll find some that got through to the operations team, and you'll compare the two. So I'd say 6 months conservatively and ongoing.
Great. Yep, so we'll keep blasting through them. We've got a few minutes yet, so we can hopefully address a bunch of these questions. The next one I've got here is talking about data usage in real time and near real time. What are the real challenges financial institutions have faced, like integrating the right technologies?
It's a good question. A lot of the technology at large global organizations is legacy tech. So they don't have things like API endpoints. They don't have easy ways of plugging in and extracting data. You've got to do it the old way of ETL, batch job, get it out, push it through, read it, ingest it. That doesn't help. So I think that's the biggest challenge. If you think about a bank's architecture like spaghetti bowl, and a lot of these big banks have been built by acquiring lots of smaller banks. So that challenge is not going to go away anytime soon. But if you're building new clean tech, you've got to use something that has extensive API capability so that you can click your fingers essentially, and within a few days you're pulling data out.
All right. Are data sources reliable? Companies House does not have enough resources to monitor data. Take £12 to set up a company on Companies House. US states maintain their own data.
Yeah, this is the same, not just for Companies House, but also for your negative news screening providers, anyone that provides external data source. I think it's a really tricky one. I mean, you've got to be able to have a feedback mechanism to highlight data. And this is the same within an organization, right? There's solutions that are out there where if a user, you see a data quality issue, you've got to be able to go somewhere and log that issue. And then it's got to find the right place and the right owner to say, hey, Mr. Person who's responsible for company house data, he has 25 things that we've picked up from the organization this month. What are you going to do to remediate it? So data quality is always going to be a massive challenge, and probably one bigger than financial crime.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting, you can't rely on just single sets of data. You've really got to take quite a wide view of how you access and where you access data from, and try to interpret all of that data in a way that gives you better insight than single threading. So it's not easy. Again, you need the right technology to be able to support that. But again, you start to do combine data from different sources to get a clearer and better picture of the organizations or the individuals that you're looking to do business with. And that really is an important way of overcoming single source weaknesses such as you might get with companies' house.
And three banks that we know have set up data architecture offices. So these are functions inside the organization that are there to clean data. And they're well funded and they're after it. So as I said, data is today's gold. People are looking after it by cleaning it first.
Okay. Next question. How do you manage the risk associated with missing true positives when using machine learning in sanctions?
Yeah, this is all around risk appetite, right? So you set your risk appetite, and as you start using these tools, you'll set it very low. You don't want to take any risk. You'll probably start by seeing false positives reduced by 1%. Right? Then you test it, then you're comfortable. You triage the 300 cases that went through, you're comfortable, you tweak it, you change it up. So this is organizational specific, but yeah, so it's all to do with risk appetite and how much confidence you have that your machine is actually learning.
Very good. See, next one. What is about the KYC lifecycle that you cannot automate or has low automation rate?
It depends what you mean by automate. So for most people, when you talk about automation, it's about getting AI or some sort of intelligence to make a decision. Sometimes automation can be just eliminating all of the manual steps that you go to bring data into one single view. So this is not about eliminating very experienced AML investigators who have a deep understanding and knowledge of that industry. What a lot of it is about trying to get and eliminate all the manual processes that they've typically had to do in the past in order to gather that data into a single place and start their investigation. So a lot of times automation is actually about just gathering data, presenting it in a consistent format, and then allowing an investigator to take action on that data, create a stop payment, manage an offboarding process, provide the information so that it's available for reporting. All of those automation options, I think, are available. And as Reece said, machine learning is certainly playing its part, but I don't think it's going to sort of eliminate all of the manual or human interactions as part of that process. I still think there's a very, very strong place for people with very deep knowledge and understanding within this function.
Yeah, it's complementary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Got it. And then a couple of minutes left, so we'll try and squeeze a few more in. But the next one is, in your opinion, at which points in the life cycle can public and private sectors work together better to tackle fraud and money laundering?
Okay.
I think right at the beginning, right? Yeah. So it's almost too late once you've detected. Right? I know that sounds a bit silly because we will always detect financial crime, but the data sources that come in from governments and from various places, if you can share that more, for example, if we have a case in a bank, we found someone who's on a sanctions list and they're operating at, say, Blue Bank, right? Should we not be sharing that with Red Bank in case they're a customer, or are we relying on Red Banks to be able to spot the same thing? So I think there's a play for that, and I think regulation has a part to play in how much sharing happens between organizations.
All right, and then public cloud providers and building data solutions, they're going to be the most cost-optimized way of implementing.
Yeah, cloud is a funny topic, right? Public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. But what the cloud providers are doing, AWS, GCP, Azure, all Ali Cloud in China, they are banking on the fact that they're going to hold an awful lot of the world's data, just for the obvious reasons of elastic scalability, cost, not having to evergreen the environment. So there's a lot of good reasons to go there. And I think what they're doing quite smartly is they're beefing up their analytics. So you can have your data sitting on those cloud providers, and they will almost give you a huge analytics, powerful machine, at a fraction of the cost it would take for you to do it yourself, because they're getting you to their cloud. So I think it is going to be the best and cheapest way of doing things, but your compliance teams should also be looking at what's going on to those cloud environments.
Final question then. The potential challenge that climate risk could have on KYC. Big one.
You start, I'll carry it.
So this is funny, right? ESG is a huge topic. It's a huge topic in all banks. It's a huge topic in technology. I think where this is going with regs tightening on ESG as well is that you're going to have organizations almost reviewing their customers, all right? Especially corporate customers. Are you aligned to our ESG strategy that we're putting all over the internet? We're the greenest bank in the world, but yet you're giving Saudi Aramco, other oil companies, big funds to go and dig more oil fields. So I think it's going to come to a head where you're going to have a scoring metric for all of your customers and your vendors, potentially employees, but that's probably a stretch, where you won't be able to be afraid to exit customers based on ESG grounds. If they don't comply or they show no effort of improving their ESG strategy, then I think some of these organizations will start exiting customers and, refusing business. So I think in the initial questionnaires, it's going to be important to understand what are the customers doing around ESG? What is their standpoint? What's their culture?
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be an evolution of the way that you manage your KYC processes, and ESG is going to be part of that evolution, and you're going to have to incorporate that into your risk assessments to see how these organizations are aligning to, as you say, your own company's stated ESG goals. Because clearly, if you're facilitating or funding business, that has an impact on how you are compliant in the statements that you are making. So that's going to be a very, very important element. The risk is clearly how then you manage organizations, and this is where it gets very complex in terms of complex supply chains as well. And that, I think, is going to be leading to a whole new level of scrutiny in terms of KYC and risk assessments, because you're not only assessing the customer that you're looking to do business with, but also potentially their supply chain as well. And therefore, you can't outsource some of your ESG responsibilities to organizations further down in your supply chain. You're going to have to incorporate that within your overall perspective of risk. So there's going to be, I think, a lot more complexity there moving forward. And it's another one of those drivers for change. The know your customer processes are going to have to evolve and adapt to incorporate this much more effectively.
Good
question.
Well, Guy, Reese, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining Reese and myself at Fraud and Financial Crime Europe 22. It's been great meeting you all, and we hope you found a lot of useful information as we went through automation across the financial crime lifecycle. If you do have further questions for us, please reach out, and my email address is at the bottom, and I hope to engage with you soon. Many thanks.